Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measure podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and a happy Tuesday.
All right.
I don't know what that was, but
I don't know what turn that took.
all
but,
of
man,
the sudden, I think I can do more with that.
Yeah.
Seth, you drive and we'll just be on for the ride.
Yeah.
I feel like someone needs to take a clip of that and then do what DJs do and then turn it into a full
Oh, there you
DJ
go.
song with Seth, Happy Tuesday. And then it turns into like a DJ song.
Intro Microsoft Ignite and build.
Yeah. Well, I see this little meme on YouTube where it says something like, what do DJs even do? And then someone takes that little phrase of like, do, and turns it into a big old mix of an EDM song. So something like that.
Man.
So, my favorite song, Happy Tuesday.
Wow.
There we go. We could be number one on the charts for Happy Tuesday.
Already number
Should
one.
be a new thing.
In songs, because we're going to hit it with the podcast. Joe Rogan, here we come.
It's already amazing. We
In
give
20
this away
years
for
from
free.
now. Right?
He's not number one on the Billboard, but we are. Awesome.
Funny.
So today's main topic is we're going to discuss a bit more around what has happened in our Paginated Report Builder. Your desktop version of Paginated Report Builder has gone through a modification. There is a new Power Query experience as you load data into your Paginated Report Builders, which is great. I love this. I think this is really a good way to go here. It's going to feel a lot more like what you experience in PowerBI.com, which is awesome. So that being said, we'll talk about that today. There's also a new thing here that has appeared, and this is in your tenant today. Currently, it is folders in a workspace. Shocker. So we kind of alluded about this or talked about this on earlier episodes. So we're going to go a bit more. What are the implications of this? What does this mean? Are there anything that we need to consider? Does this change how we behave with deploying things across our enterprise environment? And will this help us? Where's this going to fit? I guess is where we're trying to go at that topic. I also want to point out, like, the folders thing is going to be interesting to me. And Microsoft has also, at their Fabric conference, announced a new thing called task flows, which are amazing. I think I really like what they're doing with this. Very excited to see where this is going to go. We've only seen a demo of this at the Microsoft Fabric conference, so it's nothing real yet. There's been no other demos. The only place you can watch that is on the Microsoft YouTube channel or their blog post around the Fabric conference. So looks really interesting. Very excited to see where that comes from, and maybe that and folders will be a good combination together to figure out what's going on. So
I get the feeling when Task Flows does come out, that's going to dominate a month of our episodes.
I think so.
A whole month.
It's only like 8 episodes.
That's a lot.
We talk about nonsense for an hour anyway, so
it's true. Very true.
The first time you ever both agreed.
Actually, have real content for once. Yeah, that'd be good.
Do
All
we
right.
have any nonsense to talk about today?
We do have some nonsense to talk about.
I have
do some intros.
Yeah, we'll call it Parent Corner.
Okay.
So
Parent Corner with Tommy. All right, let's hear it.
we have all songs for days.
This is also going to be on the music episode. It's going to be Parent Corner. That'll be our second release. Will be Parent Corner.
That's the second album. Yeah.
Second release. We're just doing singles right now. We don't have a full band yet. We're just doing singles. Okay.
I like that. Our EP. Yeah. So,
yeah, it's the EP. Parent single EP.
You guys are veterans in the game. Your kids are older, slightly older than mine, so you've been in it. And so I'm getting introduced a lot. My oldest is 7, and so there's a lot of these new things. Rather than treating her like the toddler or the kid, where homework now doing softball and stuff. And I'm realizing that I can't coach her. I'm not going to be able to. It's because we were throwing the ball. She wasn't listening to what I said. Like, look, you want to hit a home run? Listen to me. You want to strike out? Do whatever you want. And I was like, all right, that's not nice, kind of thing. So that's when the Italian New York comes out, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's up to you, my friend, kind of thing. But we were doing homework the other day, and I could tell she was just being lazy with writing, like the 3s and everything. And I was harder on her than I think I should have been. And I'm working on that balance between, listen, work hard, do the right thing, but you're also 7. And with you guys now, if you remember that time, how do you, as a father, especially, like we're not supposed to be like, oh, it's okay. Like, how do you balance that, or what are your guys' strategies around the kids when they're not working super hard, or they're being a little lazy, but they're also children, so you have to teach them too. How do you guys approach this?
This is a great question. Well, first thing, I'll go to Power Query and I would go into M and I would start writing some. Oh, just kidding. I was trying to bring it back to
I
Power
have a
Query there.
medallion approach.
I take the medallion approach with my children. It's right now they're about in bronze. You got to work them into silver. So that's
you're bronze today, my friend.
yes. You're working on some bronze today. You got to work them into silver. So I guess so I'll give you an example of something that happened recently in our family. So I was at a restaurant. We were eating at Chipotle, and we were just eating our dinner, and my son had to go clean the table. So I cleaned our table, and then I just so happened to notice there was a table next to me that was not clean, and it just kind of bugged me. It wasn't a big deal. I went over to the drink station. I got a little napkin wet, and I wiped not only our table but the table next to us to clean up and leave.
100% see you doing this, but
Okay. So my wife's like, "Why are you doing that? You don't, leave that alone. Let's go. Let's get out of here. Like, let's go to the next place." I'm like, "Okay, fine." Surprisingly, we got a note from someone at school that had seen my son. He was at his table. Everyone had made a mess on the table. And at the end, he realized the table was messy. He went, he got an extra napkin. He took a little water from his water bottle, made the napkin wet, and he wiped down the table. So
it's classy.
The reason I bring this up is because I think something was put into his mind by watching dad be a good example and doing something for someone else that he didn't need to do. I went over above and beyond. I was in a restaurant. That was a table I didn't make messy. There wasn't stuff on the table. I went over and cleaned it just to be nice, did my table area and then one extra table and then moved on. I think he also took note of that. And I think a lot of what we do, especially when we're talking about our kids, it's a lot about how we act. Yes, we're talking to them and we're in the moment. We're teaching them something about baseball or softball, whatever that is. But it's also about these other moments that they're watching, they're observing what's going on. And I feel like for me, if trying to be a person that I want someone to emulate is very hard to do. So it's challenging. And one thing I'll definitely say is I've apologized a lot. There's been a lot of times I've gotten excited and I've said things that I shouldn't have said, and I yelled at people when I shouldn't have yelled at them. So 100% be good at apologizing and make sure your kids know that you're not perfect and you're going to need to apologize just like they're going to need to apologize. So when you get a little heated or extra over the top, it's good to know you can apologize. So those are my words of advice. I don't know if that's good or not or anything.
No, I love that.
So my take is essentially like there's an activity, typically schoolwork. The child is bored, right? Or just wants to get through something quickly because it's just a task that is something that they don't want to be doing, or they want to get to something else. And that irritates you because, right? Like you have an irritation. You want them to, that they can do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think where I've landed is it's radically different, the approach based on the personality of the child. My one child, I can just say, hey, I know you can do like much nicer. We want good penmanship when we do these assignments and things like that, so people can read. I won't have to say it again, right? They'll just do it. The other one wants to get through it as quickly as possible, has good penmanship, but in the case that you outline, is just ripping through it. The tell thing doesn't work, right? There's no resonance unless what I have found successful is giving examples for or the reasons why we would want to do that. So instead of yelling at them or like being the go do this, which is where that child turns off immediately, like just click switch, like I'm not going to listen to you anymore, or you're yelling at me, and that's not really the intent, obviously, that you're trying to portray, right? But the approach is where, hey, okay, so I'm noticing like that you're just ripping through this. Here's some reasons why we don't want to do that, right? Like your teacher's not going to be able to read it. You're like the grade may go down, or whatever the ramification, right? Or, hey, another one that works is, I know you can do your threes a lot better, and here's the reasons why we do that. If you rip through this assignment, you're going to do it again. I'm going to make you do it again because I know that you can do these things, and that's why. And then you give them motivation to take the time because they don't want to do it again. They're ripping through it because they want to get it done,
Right.
but it all of a sudden it's like, well, then I'm going to have to do it again and again. So there's no like in those cases where I'm less combative, it works a lot more at that age range because I also have one at that age, and in that kind of realm. So that's what I would say.
It's I'm happy to say your Power BI MVPs. You're also father.
Oh no, that's definitely not true. Don't put me on that pedestal there.
No.
I'll say this. Last thing I'll say is I have also had to learn that their brains are forming still.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times I look at them at 7 and think they should be adults.
Yeah.
Or they should be further along in that
problem for me too. Right.
Like you got to remember they're little. They don't understand. They don't have nearly as much experience as you do, and they're not adults. They haven't been around for 30, 40 years like us have been. Like so, there is a whole bunch of like they're still trying to learn things. Like, and I have to continually remind myself they're still growing, they're still learning, their brain's still not formed yet. They're still trying to figure out patterns and what works well. And so they'll settle into patterns, and hopefully those patterns are things that you've set up examples around and you do as a parent. But I'm trying to figure out how to bring this back to Power BI, but I can't really. I'm just kind of lost here.
I'll say one last thing. The apologizing thing I think is big. It's just funny that transition because I remember being a kid, but my kid, like I told her something and she went, I think I went white with rage just hearing the, and it's so funny with that transition. But I did apologize and I said, look, and in so many words, I said, us Pulias, we're not that smart, but we're going to work harder than anybody. Okay. So that's what I expect basically. But no, I love the advice. Love the advice here.
Awesome. Good luck on that. We'll see what we'll return to this conversation in a couple months. We'll see what happens. Awesome. So let's jump into some topics. So main topic piece now. So let's jump into what's going on in Paginated Reports. So there's a blog post that's been put out. This is also going to be in the chat window as well. So this is a blog post by Nirupa, I think is how you would say it. And she's on the Microsoft product team, and she has just announced the Get Data experience now is different. We're going to now have the new Power Query experience of grabbing all your data from Paginated. And now, to be clear, this is the desktop version of the application called Paginated Report Builder. This is not in the service. This is only in desktop.
Right.
So this is and I think this is really neat because I think this is the beginning of, hey, look, we've got this great Power Query experience online, which is different than getting things in Paginated Reports, which has been traditionally different than what you see in Power BI Desktop, which is different than what you see in Excel. All of them are different. But the code is now, there's like 4 different versions of code and how it looks. I think what's happening here is you're starting to see the service starting to work its way into other tooling, which is great because now it's going to look like this unified, simple, same experience no matter where you go. Very excited about that. Initial thoughts, Tommy?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting because if you were to say what is going to be one of the major announcements in the first 4 months of 2024, I wasn't going with desktop paginated reports. I would assume if anything, paginated would be in the service, but we already have the ability to connect to a live semantic model in paginated reports, and we've talked about paginated quite a bit. It's not our top 10, but it's something that has come up frequently, I think, because there's a lot of use cases. And I'm going through this and I'm reading the article and I'm thinking about this, writing some notes and thinking, what other solutions or what does this change for, hey, now we can deliver X, Y, and Z. And I'm trying to figure out still what X, Y, and Z is. What's going to be different that we weren't able to provide before?
I'm going to lean on Seth one a little bit more here because Seth, you've done a lot more paginated report building. That's SSRS, the old SSRS kind of reskinned and now a bit more paginated report level. When I had done paginated reports or built things in Paginated Report Builder or what the program is right now, it was hard to get data into the system. Like it just doesn't.
It is.
It wasn't as smooth or as seamless as what I would do in Power BI Desktop. You're trying
Certainly
to connect to a source, get a data table in, right? And I don't think, are there any transformations you can apply, Seth? You can't transform the data in SSRS. You literally have to do everything on a SQL server with a view,
Already cleaned.
expose the view, and then get it into. You just
Yeah.
basically connect to the view and you're it.
transformation.
Yeah.
From a big
But Paginated
transformation.
in Power BI, we've already had the ability to connect to a semantic model.
Agree, but I mean the whole experience is like I guess what I'm thinking through is, let's imagine I have a model and I need to drop a couple columns, modify some things, right? There's potentially some additional transformations you would maybe want to do
For that
before you get it into the paginated report piece. So maybe there's something there. I mean, again, to your point, Tommy, like, right, our initial experience with paginated reports has always been do all the transformations upstream, get the table exactly as you need it, and so that your semantic model is already created, done, ready to go, and you bring it forward to the report side. So I think that is a bit different now. So what it's doing now is it's bringing more of the Power Query capabilities closer to where you're actually doing the design work for the paginated report. And maybe the reason here. Oh, sorry, Seth, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Maybe
the reason here is if we think about what we can get data from now, it's a little different, right? Before, Power BI was only models, and that you pulled from there to get it into paginated reports. Now we have Lakehouse. So we have all the rich data sources that paginated reports has. Why not pull from tables now? And so if you're pulling from tables, now I have nothing's related. Maybe I need to flatten. I mean, again, my opinion here is you're flattening data down. So you're probably going to need to bring together potentially multiple tables, merge them, join them together. And now there is no semantic model in that lens.
Not available yet.
I think
not page 9 tables not available yet.
Lakehouse is
not available yet. Okay.
data flows are.
But what is?
Excel workbooks. Yeah.
Databricks.
Databricks.
Oh.
So what is we've talked about Report Builder in the past, right? And when I guess posing somewhat of a question and or not.
Lakehouses are available. Sorry.
When we talk about paginated reports, where do they fit in the ecosystem of us developing reporting for the business? It's typically in that data dump arena, right? Like we've talked hey, a business individual comes in and they're like, well, they don't know how to articulate what they need, or they haven't done the analysis on the data to be able to drive towards let's build a Power BI report where I can visualize this aggregated data because I know that's going to be valuable for me. So this is like the early phases typically is one use case. And I think the most relevant, because the secondary one would be somehow I created a Power BI report and somebody's dumping out that curated data. Also possible, but it's, it's kind of in the, this is the super relevant, cleaned, aggregated data that I've filtered by, using a Power BI report, and there happens to be a table and I want to export it out. I'm not a big fan, but I get it. What is really exciting about this, and it stinks that this is a recorded episode, because if Alex is in the chat, we would have had some good dialogue, but we probably would have been derailed completely. Is I've taken for granted in the past that the main data source for paginated reports was SQL, right? So having that as a back end is great. However, not all my data is in there anymore. So if what this does is take me out of the, hey, I've always just, if I need to do paginated, put data in a SQL server and easily extracted it into this form, it opens my eyes and go, holy crap, it's so much more useful, because what is a very real business case all the time are individuals who know their business area or the data that they need and are cobbling it together themselves from this Power BI report and that Excel spreadsheet and this thing. This gives me the opportunity to give them data, I think, in a fashion that It's not modeled yet, right? They need to do some analysis. We need to like drive towards that discovery of like all the things we can do for them. But it helps me easily consolidate all that data into a place and say, yep, here, all you got to do is this. And that's what I think is really exciting about it.
I agree too. And I'm actually going, so just to be clear, what we talked about earlier is when I was looking at the get data experience, yes, lake houses are available. It's everything that's in normal Power Query. It's all there. Lake houses are there. You have all the experiences, data flows, legacy, data flows Gen 2, anything you want to go access. There's now a lot of other data sources. You can do table storage, blob storage, all the other things. So all that stuff exists and is also there now as well. So I'm very excited for that one. And again, I think this is a really neat move for Microsoft. What I'm not quite sure will happen is, yes, I can bring data together and shape it, but am I loading multiple tables? What is that going to look like, later on? And so, yes, I understand Power Query exists to get data into the system, but what about the related tables? So it's not an analysis services model that doesn't exist. I don't think that's existing inside Paginated reports. So I'm not building a cube, nor am I building tables or relationships or measures. So that's still, if we're going to need things like that, you'll have to build that somewhere else. But this does expose a lot more tables of data to Paginated reports across everything you would want.
What you just said knocked my camera literally off the digital sphere. So
there we go.
So there's a few things here though, because I love the idea of the product of Power Query in Paginated. It's fun. I'm struggling with redundancy though, and I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, there's some other cases with some more raw data. To your point, there's the tables, but most of the time, right, I'm going to want some of my metrics. I'm going to want usually what's already in a semantic model in a paginated report. It's going to solve, if I can usually create something in a semantic model and people want that export of data, we can then create a paginated report off the semantic model. I feel like for the most part, you're going to be probably grabbing from the same tables, from the same information. So that's where I'm struggling. Yeah, there's a ton more sources here. I mean, how much are you going to need?
But do you want to? But my question is, like, I guess what I would go after is a ton more sources just makes this tool more valuable. And again, I'm not gonna say you should only connect to analysis services models. I ideally probably I will, right? If I'm designing them, that's probably what I'm going to go after because I know it so well. I know I need to build. So, but there has to be, what this is trying to do is it's trying to make paginated reports a Swiss Army knife more for all the different sources that are there. So we may not have use cases specifically for a single source, but someone else may. There may be something else there that's like a weird source. I'm going right from Google Analytics. I just need a table of data that I can report and schedule a report on that. So it could be a lot of these, like, we're just trying to collect data, get a table together, and then just dump it out somewhere. And then that serves the business needs. So I think you're taking I feel like what you're saying, Tommy, is a very central BI lens on. You're right. I agree with you. From a central BI thing, that's 100% there.
Point, yeah.
But when you're Microsoft looking at this going, like, we're trying to service all users, even the ones that are in like a business unit that have their own workspace or doing their own thing, and someone says, I just need to get this data out of this system every day, schedule it, email it. Even, I don't know, Paginated Reports does the dynamic email lists now as well too. So you can do dynamic.
Is that the one just in the service though, or is that both?
Maybe that's just in the service?
Yeah.
But regardless, like, my thought being is this would allow a team to say, I'm going to go to this source. We're not going to make sure everyone can connect to Google Analytics. Instead, someone will build the report. Here's the page of the data that we care about, and we'll just have it available to you in the service. Go download it when you want, or have it emailed to you every day. Done. And maybe that's probably a use case that exists, but that doesn't need to live in the central BI team all the time. Right. What do you think, Seth? Am I off base there, or do you agree?
No, I 100% agree with you. I think Tommy was distracted with his video in that. Let me reiterate.
Okay, got it.
The two use cases that I see in here are the one, Tommy, that you defined, which is I have full semantic models. Somebody needs to do some data dumping. I can connect to them, dump it out in paginated reports. It's been there. Fantastic. Yep, works. How much, like, I think you're in this realm, though, of That's the only thing you're doing with all the data all the time. And there's this other realm that I live in where the vast majority of business users do not have access, and you
Mhm.
throw in don't have the skills to even access the data that they would need to make the decisions that they do. So what does that do in the business? It forces them to cobble together all of the random data sets, whether they come from an Excel document, a Power BI model, right? Like multiple different places to come up with an answer for something. And you know that's rife with error, right? So if I have systems of data that are curated but not modeled, this is a perfect opportunity, even for a central BI team, to say, hey, we don't have enough bandwidth right now to build out this full model for you, and it's not part of our stuff. So in the meantime, as part of this initiative, and this I think falls in line with that episode where we talked about like how do you engage with the business? Like what are the things, how do you get to the path towards serving their data needs? Sometimes that's a data dump so they can do their own analysis. Eventually, the hope is that we streamline things, we automate it to the point where they're just looking at a few visuals because they can make their decisions faster, but they're not there yet. So there's so many use cases in this where I could say to the business user, this is now an opportunity for us to automate a lot of the manual stuff you're doing in just cobbling data together. Because here, you can take here, take here, take here, take here, use Power Query to do all your transformations. And now you have a much better singular output, even from yourself. That's a great starting point, as opposed to you doing this manual step process every single time. So I think to me, it's twofold. Way earlier on, this opens up the ability to consolidate and transform data from multiple different systems in an extremely easy way. If you've ever used Paginated SRS before, right?
Yeah.
There was none of that. You were doing all of it in stored procedures or prior and just connecting. So it'll be interesting to see, I think, as I think this is just in preview, but like there are limitations right now, like how many data sources can we connect? Like there's a
gateway.
disconnect, I think, between the documentation that's saying, the limitation is I can only have one data set, but the video shows me I can have one data source and multiple data sets that come out of it, I think. So I got to test it out because obviously that extensibility of having multiple different data sources even come into the report, I think would be beneficial, but not necessary, especially if I'm like, hey, I want to give you some data you otherwise don't have access to. I understand where you're pulling it from, and it's not fully modeled yet, but let's keep the conversation going while serving the business need. And that's the other part of this. Business doesn't have time to wait for your 3 weeks to put together a full-fledged model, to put them in the frame of mind to say, yeah, okay, we can build the Paginated report, all the Power BI reports, all the things that all tie together in a perfect ecosystem would come from that. Like there's so much stuff that's in transit that I think this solves the visibility problem for, that it is very exciting. And I can understand why, Alex has been pushing at us about it as well, even in some of the previous episodes we've got.
So let's play on this a little, because you mentioned the one of the audience or the personas that would be creating the report or the paginated report. You said the centralized BI instead of the semantic model. Who's the other persona or personas that's going to be then utilizing this that previously was
I
not?
think it makes it much more accessible for self-service.
Okay.
Like think about it before. Who was using paginated reports?
From a consumer point of view or from a use case?
From a build perspective. That's what you were just asking about, right?
It's BI or IT. Who's building it?
I've got to know what this data source connection is. I'm connecting to a stored procedure, a view, a table, whatever. Like
right.
It's not easy. It's like the old school way of like, yes, this is the configuration dialog box. You have to know this. Here's the permissions, et cetera, et cetera. I think this also opens up the door for easier self-service of paginated reports. And that was my other point. Like in efficiency wise, I could say, hey, do you have these things that you're cobbling together and you're manually like doing your matching and all this stuff? And like, this would be a way that they could just stick with the data, right? And then you're moving people and culture forward because they start to understand automated processes are their friend. They save time. They're still getting their raw output. And then you start to have conversations around, okay, well, what are the decisions you're making off that? Oh, well, I pivot it and I roll this stuff up and I create these aggregations. And man, wouldn't it be great if I could see this stuff over time and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, hey, we
Great.
have a next step for you, right?
Yeah.
Let's start having a conversation around how do we take what you've built. And what's even more fantastic about this is, right, the data set, Power Query, I can just pull that into a Power BI report, or I understand what transformations they're doing, so I can leverage them when we build out the model.
So let me play devil's advocate, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Sure. And what is the product placement with Paginated? That we'll ask the first question. What does Paginated do better than any other Power BI product right now? Its placement in the
Large number of exports of data.
large number of exports of data. It's always
Right.
on.
Its sweet spot there is like, you want
right?
more than 1 million rows of data in
Yeah.
a CSV file. Power BI can't do it. I mean, like reports can't do it. You need Paginated reports. So that side of things. So let me say it this way. This is going to sound bad, but this is how I perceive it. Right. There is a need to data dump. There is a need to mass export things, and I think that's one area where Paginated reports goes well. All right, that's one. You're going to go to the other ones,
I was
Tommy?
going to say the other one, it's always on. Anyone can access and get that data dump immediately. They don't have to worry about a refresh. It's immediately going to have the latest data, usually.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that one, but yeah, it is. Well, I mean, if you're pulling from a semantic model, you're relying on that. But the Paginated report at the time of request gets whatever is currently available in the server, the thing. So if it's a view on a server and the data is changing, it gets that current view of data. Does that make sense? Yep.
Yeah. And the potential complexities here is, Mike, what is your biggest gripe with Power Query? I mean, we talk about how great it is, but at the same time, we all know there's a grow up story eventually with Power Query. Now, I'm assuming they've worked on this where, that business user, the self-service, we've hopefully taught them, put them through proper training. We still struggle with doing dumb things in Power Query, adding too many steps.
Speak for yourself. I mean, come on. I'm just kidding.
Remind you of technical debt, but just a little extra steps there. But no, but like at the same point, it's incredibly easy. It's amazingly easy to transform, manipulate data with Power Query, but almost at your own discretion because you don't realize how many steps you sometimes add. So all of a sudden now that potential case for error of Power Query comes into play. And now you're dealing with, again, this data dump, rows and rows of data. Am I calling Power Query every single time this happens? Right. And this business user, do I trust them to do that? And I think that's where I'm seeing the potential. If you were to say the negative side, the half empty side of this,
Tommy,
I'm listening.
Pull your head out of IT land. You're talking about, oh, can we trust the business user, and like they could be making errors in Power Query, where you now have an interface where you have steps for every action that you're doing. You can walk through them, you can remove them, you can add them, you can modify things. And what is their current landscape today without it? It's the one I just described. They're doing all this stuff in Excel or manually or by key lookup or, dude, like it's all craziness right now. This helps them. So if they make mistakes, it's on them. Just the same way you're reducing that surface area though by giving them an interface that they can consolidate all that down to, as opposed to hidden stuff in Excel files. I'm going to manually generate this report. I'm going to load it into this spreadsheet. Oh, crap. I forgot I added this like VLOOKUP crazy thing. I just removed 30% of my data in the next tab, but I didn't realize it. Like that stuff happens all the time.
And you know what? That's fair. That's absolutely fair. And you know what? Devil's advocate 1.0, I concede that.
you can't assume everyone's going to be at the level of maturity that you are in this organization. I mean,
No.
so I think Seth, you bring a really good point there. And to be honest, like I'm playing with it right here on my computer. I'm getting some data from a lake house. I'm pulling it in. I'm playing around with it. Like, to be honest, I really like this experience. Like when I did paginated reports before, it was clunky. I didn't understand the data set experience. I didn't know how to get stuff in. So like even just like from a business user standpoint, right? People love Power BI because I can go into Power Query, do the thing, make my table, click a couple buttons, boom, it's already there. It's kind of very easy to this to me reduces a lot more friction for me to get that initial data load into paginated reports, which anything we can do to make that easier, great. Because there is a reason why we want to use this. And this, I think it's about making things more accessible to people to build things that they need inside Power BI. And whether or not we can try, like I'm a big proponent of, I don't really care what data is being made in the organization as long as there's a policy in place that says there are handoff or transitions between, okay, central team is going to make lake houses and this data will be in there and correct. You pull from that, build whatever you want, but whatever you build, that is your responsibility. And there is a way, a method to have leadership understand that things coming out of this team or from these people, the transition of responsibility has transitioned. And so as long as that's documented and people know where to go, and when there's problems with things, they can go fix it. As long as that exists, I'm fine. Let the business units do what they want to do to make things work. I'm okay with it.
So you raised my next question that I'll propose to you. This is Devil Advocate 2.0. You're the director of BI, big organization, middle organization, doesn't matter. There's a sharp spike in paginated reports across the organization.
I doubt that'll ever happen, but okay, we'll keep going with this one. This is sounding more like a dream at this point, but go ahead, keep going.
Oh, we got Power Query now. That's what I'm trying to say. So
okay.
So there's a pretty significant spike in usage and creation of paginated. Is that a good? Is that a positive? Is that the direction you're trying to go, or is that something we're trying to deter? Because I think we all have a.
No, I don't. I think you're even your question is a bit. I think your question is a bit off. Like, let me. So I understand your question. I think where you're going, right? Big direction. Where are we trying to go, right? Let's talk data culture here for a moment. What is the data culture we're trying to drive? And right, you're assuming a couple things here that I want to just be very clear about. People in organizations, even large organizations, don't even know there's an increased use in paginated reports.
That's fair.
So first and foremost, I would say a lot of organizations just in general struggle with what are we doing in PowerBI.com in general. No one has comprehensive reporting around what all this looks like. So one, I'm going to play this like this is my game here, right? In my organization, I'm going to have some sort of reporting on it. Now, if I'm looking at it regularly, that's on me, the director, but I'm looking at what's going on. When I see behaviors that are inside the ecosystem, I think I would want to understand the behavior first before I start saying or making judgment calls around that's what we don't want. We don't want that kind of behavior. What could be happening is the someone on a team or some teams have figured out, hey, we can start using paginated reports. My customer needs data. We've got to figure out how to get data out of our system, paginate report it, get it right, and then send it to the customer. And so now there's a daily or even weekly exercise, maybe weekly, maybe daily exercise of people lifting data out and serving our customers. So one, I'm first saying, let's understand the behavior as to why it exists. So the first observation would be is, yes, it's increasing. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's what we want. So then I would, from there, go to the next step would be, okay, let's figure out who's doing the increasing volume of those things. That's the next thing. And then I would go talk to them and say, hey, I see you're finding a lot of value in adding additional, paginated reports. Tell me why you need this. Is there any other way we can further automate it? Can we build you a portal that has the paginated reports built into it automatically for the customer? So even still, like, I'm still not worried about, like, that may be the output of that response may just be they need to get the paginated report done and export the data. If that's driving value and automating things for that team, great. There's probably opportunity to do more, but for now, like, let's understand the need. So again, I feel like it's a progression step where you're trying to engage the business in what I would call like the hardest or the most difficult areas of the business. Let's go find where we're spending a lot of time and people to manipulate data and start focusing on what can we do to automate and produce that in a regular pattern over and over and over again, right? So there's two balancing parts to this story. There's the central BI team that is doing regular metered. The usage is more consistent because it's a very steady process because we know that this is going to be used a certain way. Then there's the other side of the world, which was what everyone wants to talk about, is self-service. So there's a self-service BI, and self-service BI I think is a lot harder to plan for from a capacity, from a usage. There's a lot more spikes in random demand. You get I'm an Excel user. I'm going to show up to this really big model, and I'm going to try and rip out 100 columns and not filter anything. And the machine, literally, the queries just grind to a halt. And then you get bad reports of, well, my Excel files are very slow. I can't get data out now. Let's talk about behaviors. Let's talk about what that looks like. So then again, now we're talking a slight data culture change, right? Did we not do a good enough job explaining how to get from a cube into an Excel file or a cube into a paginated reports? What is going on there? And maybe they don't need the Excel document. Maybe we should have pushed them towards paginated reports in the service, or we should actually teach them how to build their own paginated reports on their machine and pull directly from the lakehouse and not kill my semantic models. Like there's a lot of like behavioral changes that I think we have to understand to still get them what they want, but yet do it so we don't spend a ton of extra capacity. So that's where I feel like the game I play a lot is, right? I want to do the solution with the least amount of cost possible.
I'll accept that answer.
Sorry, that's a long answer for a lot of things. There's a lot of thoughts there. Seth, what do you think?
I agree.
Don't even say I agree.
No, I do.
No, just
because. So all the highlighted points, right? Tommy, you're assuming that because a large spike of paginated report usage happens, that equates to something bad. And what I like about Mike's answer, equates to something. What I like about Mike's answer is having an understanding of like activity in a system or behaviors that are changing. What does it mean? What are the opportunities or what is happening in the organization that's changing? And the argument could be made that, hey, we're letting people know like that paginated, this thing is available to them. It means people are starting to pull data through this new thing and there's value to them there. What we can presume or what we would follow up on is what is that value? You didn't have access to the data before, or it's an automated process that now can be repeatedly done to get there and generate their data sets. And then further beyond that, hey, if we see this rampant spike up, what's better about that is I now know or have a path to see what they're doing versus the Wild West right now of Excel, right? And then I can drive towards, hey, if we're doing these things for automated and solid insights, are you guys like, what are you doing with the data? Well, we're pivoting it. We're doing these things. Great. Well, did you know we can get you faster insights by taking this raw data and actually shaping it into visualization? So I think like you're progressively or intentionally using the tool set or could to enhance the data culture story like Mike is talking about. The more people are working with and understand the transformation process of data and how to start shaping it for their needs, the more valuable the organization as a whole is going to be, and the easier those conversations down the road are going to be as well.
And that's fair. And to your point, yeah, I made a lot of assumptions. There are a lot of leaps I made with the question. And obviously that's part of the devil advocate side. I like both of your answers. And I like the reply because yeah, there's a lot of behavior there too. A few things I'll say that I still think, how much do you push this? And this is where I'm really considering this. If I'm thinking of the onboarding for self-service or the onboarding of BI for teams, departments, how much is this the push? And the reason I say that is, yes, this is a solution and a solution in a lot of cases. However, we already know how hard it is to get people off of data dumps as it is, or Excel tables. They're familiar with that.
I don't think you're gonna have a single day where you're gonna be able, or change in a month that's gonna allow you to get rid of all that anyways. It's gonna have to exist on.
So, and I think that has to be part of the conversation, part of the understanding too, right? Because I literally just had a conversation 2 days ago, And it was next Power BI report with 45 pages that was basically a paginated for every page. But you ask, what do they want? Like this with another column, because it's one of those, the unknown known. They don't know what else is available in Power BI, what it can do. It's just what I think is available. And I think that has to be part of the acceptance if you're pushing paginated, that, yeah, now if you want to shift towards an easier answer, because this may solve a problem quickly, but is it the right solution in the long run? And how hard is it going to be to shift people towards, I don't want to say what we want them to do, because again, I can't argue with Seth with the idea that we want people to know and work with the data and be familiar with that. So I can't argue with that, but there's a part of me still with, I want people to be pushed towards that data culture, and that's not data dumps at the end of the day.
But I disagree with you. I think it could absolutely be part of a program to get people up to speed on how to utilize data or understand the capabilities of the tool sets that they have. Now with this, you have a very easy way to say, listen, if you guys and you can do this in any business area. I guarantee 5 conversations will produce examples in anybody you talk to in the business. How many reports are you putting together that come from multiple sets of data? All of them. Yeah. How much time are we wasting generating this report over here, generating this report over here, combining the things, doing the things I need to do to fit the data together before I even get to my analysis? This is a easy step to say, hey, there's this new interface over in this tool. Go connect to these things, do the transforms, and you get one table. That is your table you can output that you can start doing analysis on. What did you just do? You drove efficiency into the organization, right? Now I have one output that I can go do things with. Follow-up conversation after you get people driving to efficiency to not do jobs where they think copying and pasting is a job. And dude, it's all over the place, right?
Oh, yeah.
Push this in, efficiency. Now that you're analyzing the data, we're all in the same data set. What are you doing? How are you aggregating the data? What are you analyzing? Some of it is, hey man, I need to row by row stuff. That's what we're doing. We're analyzing the values and verifying this. But it would be great if I had some outlier detection, or if I could see what values all have this thing. Hey, that's a great conversation. Let's have it. Did you know I can take this data set and produce these visuals for you, and automatically which ones are the ones you care about? Holy crap, Tommy, you're the best thing in the world, right? So it's a progressive step where people, I think, struggle, and we've talked about this, is they can't make the mental leap of connect all this data, transform it, and my interface is Power BI. What happens? What happened? I don't know the metric, but I guarantee you most of self-service is generating a table of data in Power BI. That's what they're doing right now. So this is a much clearer step to me in a tool set that is designed to dump out tables of data. The minute you go to the next step is where we start talking about Power BI. And from this interface now, because Power Query is part of that, to take that and leverage it into Power BI, or understand here are the things that they're doing, the data sets that they need, so I can pull that into my model and then have a much more full-fledged solution. But this is all the incremental steps towards that.
Yeah, and I think Tommy, again, I want to kind of illuminate. There's 2 maybe paths I'm thinking here too, right? There's the certified stuff, right? So things that we know are governed, regulated. We're kind of we know what the output should be for that kind of stuff, and that to me feels like it comes from more central BI. There's a whole bunch of low hanging fruits or other analysis things that are occurring, one-offs, self-service things, other things that are occurring here that just need lots of information to get out somewhere and let people. I mean, I don't think there's any solution I've ever seen that could say, look, I can totally get rid of Excel and never use it again and extract data and move things around. It just doesn't happen that way. So any tool that you produce, the first question is, how do I export it? Where's the export button? Every tool, doesn't matter what it is. So I think there's always going to be some layer of need there. I think what I would like to maybe highlight here in this is, yes, this adds a lot of capability for a lot of the organization. I think it's going to be very important to identify across your team or across your company in the data culture that you have right now, where are the areas of heavy usage in analytics? What's going on there? And is there anything that we can help automate, push forward, move more into Power BI reports so it's consistent and it's regularly coming out? But full well knowing there's going to need to be a plethora of tools and a plethora of stuff that's going to need to exist that's just going to be throwaway work. It's going to be, I have this one-off analysis for this financial team. I'm going to do this thing. We're going to run it. We're going to figure out why. We're going to present it, and we're going to move on. That report will never be used again. It doesn't make sense to make that all central BI stuff, and to assume that a central BI team will need to be doing all that work, and we're going to move everyone away from straight data dumps. I think is a short-sighted picture of where we think the organization should go.
And I think this also, it gets extended in terms of value for many different use cases where I'm an analyst, I have to produce a data set for somebody else, or I'm doing something. And that's where the subscriptions come in. And even the new feature where you can subscribe and dump a file in OneDrive or SharePoint. Huge win, right? Now I don't have to do any manual work. I literally can take all this data, do the transforms, dump it out, and I had to deliver this thing for somebody else, and that file gets sent there every single day. The other aspect of this that I guess on the complete polar opposite, I think unblocks the potential for more people to learn Paginated, because where Paginated is good, albeit in an old school way, is pixel perfect reporting. It's generating a PDF, right? If I'm a business user and oh my gosh, like I need to create an invoice form, right? I'm in accounts billable, or like what we don't have something to do, like something to put that together. I need to generate 1,000 invoices, but we don't have any format for that. Well, before the blocker was my data is not in SQL. I have no idea how to connect to it. Like I don't know how to consolidate all my data. Like this unblocks that data connection problem and allows them to just care about the thing that they need to create, which albeit is a learning curve, but that's the front end. It's how do I build the front end thing? And once I do, boom, I can generate all of these.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about the other learning you have to do around just getting the design right.
Nothing's free, but at the same time, like this is a monumental leap in this tool to open the doors for other people to use it or for it to get wider adoption.
Okay, so we have, so I think we'll pause there because I know we're going on time, and I'll give my last thoughts because I think we could. Oh man, I could keep going with this. I don't need coffee when I talk to you two. This is just what I need.
I think this is a great topic, and again, I think this is. I'm thinking, Tommy, this is a good point. I think what this is a real struggle for organizations today. Currently, how much do I let people just run wild and do stuff? How do I control it? How much do I control? Where do we feel like we can then open up and let people do their own thing? So to me, I think this is challenging a lot of what people have traditionally done, because there's been a lot tighter control around a lot more of the data inside organizations. And this is a tool. Microsoft has made it very clear. Everyone's a data analyst. And some data cultures and companies aren't equipped to be able to let that happen.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, Seth, you just brought up something I didn't think about. Super easy to get data in. No IntelliSense and a completely different user interface than anything in Power BI.
Yep.
Just try to do, if you want to do repeating columns, like good luck, have fun. Best of luck Googling that. Anyways, but my final thoughts, and I think a combination of what you guys said, I'll tend to formulate in terms of a strategy. The biggest thing I'll say is it's very hard to change a group of people's behavior. So if this is something you're going to push, I think there has to be a follow-up story. But I think very much to what Seth said, if this is a stepping stone and a necessary stepping stone in your data culture, by all means push it.
Yep.
But I can't just say, and they're in the 80% of the cases, the majority of the cases, there needs to be a follow-up story too. Like, okay, we're going to push for you, Paginated, you can own it. in a month or so, we're going to follow up with you and we're going to have a necessary conversation on, is this the final solution? Is there something better? Because once you get that behavior in, man, it is so hard to get people now to adapt again, to change the technology again, whatever technology you're really introducing, especially when it comes to data.
Again, think of it as a learning experience, right? So this might be step one, right? So this is where your community practice comes into play. This is where, you do the monitoring. And potentially, right, if you have monitoring set up right, you can carve out portions of reporting based on workspaces and send those to different team leaders in those different workspaces. Again, if you set up the structure of the organization of your center of excellence, the people that are using this, there's a federated individual from that team that is representing what they're doing in their workflows, participating in the central community around what is Power BI. So, let them do the work they need to do. And to your point, just let them know, hey, we're monitoring it. We're looking at things. The central team is setting up best behaviors and best practices. And we're going to find where we see teams not doing best practices and then working with them and educating and trying to push them towards a different way. So again, it's a progression. Certain teams may not even have the skills hired on their team to go beyond dumping data and then do it in Excel, but that may change over time. So again, I don't think it's always a set in stone thing. It's kind of a moving target to some degree.
Just be aware that you're organically creating a process and a habit for a team with any technology implement. So
I'd rather do that than have none.
Cool.
I'd rather influence the behavior than just let it just happen. Right. I totally agree. Seth, any final comments as we wrap?
I love the feature change. I think it opens some fantastic new use cases for a wider audience to find out paginated reports.
Yep.
And there may be some on the full, like the far end of, kind of the pixel and subscription, Pixel Perfect and PDF generation that we could talk about further, but I'm most excited about just a tool that allows me to produce data for people in quick ways, regardless of if it's in a model or not. And that alone, and opening the door for them to find some efficiencies in the automation of Power Query, I think is invaluable.
My final thoughts here is we thought we were going to run out of topic on this one, and we weren't going to be able to talk through all of it. So here we are, an hour later, and we've been able to talk everything about paginated reports, and we didn't even touch on folders at this point. So I will say folders are cool. I like them.
Next time
we'll talk more about folders. But for paginated reports, I think, again, my main thought here is the data culture is already happening in your organization. I would, again, you wouldn't drive a car blind. You shouldn't run your Power BI environment without some sort of monitoring in place. Honestly, I really wouldn't. I mean, you need some deeper insights as to what's going on in your environment. And again, I can't stress enough. There's some major wins that organizations that do well with Power BI. There's a habit that they typically enact. One of them is they have a executive sponsor for all of Power BI that's letting people figure things out, helping structure, helping governance things happen. The second thing is it's the center of excellence. There needs to be a consortium of people in the company that are helping set policy and direction. If you say we're never going to export data, that's what we cannot allow that, then this is probably paginated reports, probably something you want to minimize the use of. If you are an organization that's going to balance central and self-service a bit more, or allow more self-service for specific teams, you're the central team is responsible for educating, deciding the patterns, figuring out what that is. They are responsible for helping the organization move forward with the policies and education of the people, so we can then better utilize the technology. So I think a lot of this is just kind of like culture-based things, and you don't influence the culture without some sort of leadership helping support that. Anyways, all this to say, thank you all so much for listening to the podcast. We hope this was valuable for you. We hope you were arguing as you were walking or doing your activities as well with us about your opinions around this. If you found a different perspective, or if you like a perspective here that you found in the podcast, please share it. We really, really need the help getting this message out to other people. We think people will like the podcast if they find it, and we're trying to talk about good topics. So if you liked it, please share it. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
I think I'm on a 4 for 4 streak, by the way, with not getting with saying the words properly. So
you
can find us you can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. It helps us out a ton. Do you have a question, an idea, or a topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode? Head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of PowerBI.Tips social media channels.
We thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.